cliff area, and these guys went on up to the top of the mountain, stuck some yucca sticks up on the top, the staffs, kind of like just making their mark, I guess. They went to the top, climbed the top of the mountain, and they're just coming back down. And most of them just ran on by, but Chris was there and Donnie. And I remember standing there with Chris looking into this cave. This cave was, I've heard of stories like this, and over around Arizona, Superstitious Mountains, and then south of Arizona. I've heard stories of people who, and there's lots of in Indian lore about these places. David Paulides, by the way, who has Can-Am Missing Project, David Paulides is one of my favorite authors also as well. And you ever get a chance, he does like America 411 and the amount of people that go missing in our national parks. Just, he puts out really good content, unbiased content. He reports the facts. So, but anyways, and these types of scenarios, I'm still looking for this cave, because what I go up there and see now is not what we saw when we were kids. But I had other stories of the cave entrance was very similar to this. Like at the bottom of my elbows, it was kind of just cone shaped at the top. But when me and Chris stood at the entrance of that cave, there was I believe it was a pine tree growing up in the front of it. But we stood there, and I remember looking into the cave, and only because it was so dark, and the desert was bright. This is like noon. This is midday when we're out running around these mountains. And by the way, these mountains are right near a state park called Sitting Bull Falls, if you've ever been in that part of the Guadalupe Mountains. If not, you can look it up online. You can see the falls. You can see different stuff. But this is in that vicinity, in that part of the mountains. And I remember standing there and looking in, and I told Chris, I said, "Do you want to go in? Let's go in." And he's like, "We can't really see in there." But there were some bones, like there was a predator there of some kind. I'm guessing maybe an owl, or maybe I would say at most a mountain lion would be like the only thing that we'd find in that cave. And so we decided, because we didn't have a flashlight with us. It's a Boy Scout camp, so great. We were well prepared, right? Boy Scout motto: be prepared. Middle of the day, we didn't have our flashlight with us. We might have had a pocket knife at best. Nonetheless, we decided not to go into the cave because it was dark and we could only see about 10 feet in. We could see the walls of the cave going back, the wall going back about 10, and it was fairly narrow. We could have walked in sideways, maybe like this, and got through our shoulders. And when I go back there now, and I look up and see and identify the pentagram etched into the stone in the cliff, and then I go to the only thing around there that even remotely resembles a cave. It's just like a little cropping. It doesn't exist. It's not there. So unless there's another cliff in the same vicinity with another pentagram, I would need a drone to go up there and fly it around now to just look to see if I could find the cave. It doesn't exist. It's not there. This is not a Mandela effect where we'll discuss the Mandela effect on Bizarre, Strange, and Weird. But basically, the Mandela effect is where you remember something. It's not a false memory. It's a misremembered memory. Mandela effect is where you remember things differently than what they actually are. So Chris, for example, the friend I'm just talking about, right? His little sister. She had an awards assembly at the junior high school where we all went. Now, Sarah was much younger, and so when we went, I was back in town, and they told me, "Hey, Sarah's got an awards assembly at the junior high tonight. Would you like to come with us?" And because the family was great and Sarah was like a sister, I said, "Oh, I'd love to go." And so I went to the awards assembly, and after the awards assembly, they had like an open house where you could go over and walk through the school and meet the teachers, and the parents could see the teachers and talk about their students and all this stuff. So what we did was we went over and we walked through the halls, the main halls of the junior high. And when I walked through the halls of that junior high as a grown man, I hadn't been back there since I was a teenager. I felt like I'd reach out with both hands and touch the walls and the ceiling. The halls seemed that small. They weren't how I remembered them. I remembered they had the bottom locker, the top locker, And I remember I had a top locker. I remember exactly where it was at. I don't remember the number now, but I dream about stuff like that every once in a while. But I remember when I was there as a teenager, as a kid in the 8th grade, 9th grade, touching the top of the locker would have been a feat, you know. So when I go back and everything seems so small and claustrophobic and the hall seems so short and the doors seem so small and the rooms are not as big as I remember them, that's kind of like the Mandela effect. This thing with the cave, that's not what this was. I stood there as a grown man, and I would have been able to walk in that cave that me and Chris stood there and looked into. I would have been able to walk into it. I'm talking about as a grown man sideways. As a little teenage boy, I could have probably just walked right into the cave without ducking. And I could see back 10 feet. There's nothing like that there now. And so maybe someday I'll find it, maybe I won't, but I don't know what changed. But so those are some of the places that don't really fit into the Oaty ghost towns and abandoned cities and ancient ruins. That kind of stuff that I want to talk about. There's not in there. Moving right along. This one is going to be a channel. I love cryptids. Oaty cryptids. Werewolves, dogmen, all of these things that I used to think would never exist and don't exist, and where do they come from? What are they doing here? It's like the world is shrinking because of cryptids. Cryptids are basically animals that are reported to exist that aren't supposed to. That's what a cryptid is, an unknown animal. It's like cryptozoology. And so I love cryptozoology. So you'll say, even in the scriptures in the Bible, it talks about cryptids. So David's mighty men. You remember the movie 300 with Spartans and all of that? Well, King David in the Bible actually had some, and he himself was a super type of soldier. And yeah, so it talks about one of his mighty men. If you want to go read about his mighty men, just look up David's mighty men in the scriptures. You'll find it there. First Kings, Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, somewhere in there. It's listed, actually. They give a list of all of his mighty men. Let's see, like Joab, his 2 brothers, Ahaziel. These men were like human army tanks. They done some amazing things in battle. Hands down, they were like ninjas, barbarians, Scythians, Viking, all rolled into one. These men were amazing combatants. One of them is recorded as going down into a pit and slaying a lion. At one point is recorded as killing 2. Now Moab was a place in the Bible where Naomi went with her husband and her 2 sons. Her husband died, and then her 2 sons, Achilion and Mahlon, they died after taking wives in Moab. There ain't no bread in Moab, right? So they left, and one of them took a wife, the Moabitess Ruth, and the other one was Orpah. Well, after her sons died, Naomi came back to Israel. Well, when it's so that's where the story takes place. But Moab was a country, and David, one of David's mighty men was recorded in Scripture as killing 2 lion-like men of Moab. Is that cryptozoology at its best, or what? Part lion, part human? This comes from the mixing of DNA way back in the day, and I know there's a lot of people who don't understand that, but let me explain something to you. When you're studying the scripture, there are in the scripture what we would consider cryptids, but all that aside, when you're reading the Bible, there's the way things that we wish things were, and then there's actually what God said. So there is the God that we want and the God who really is, just like the song. And then there's the Bible that we want, and then there's the Bible that really is. So yeah, cryptids, I'm fascinated by all of the creatures on Earth, living and past. It's very interesting stuff. I find DNA in and of itself, I find DNA to be very interesting all by itself. All right, so cryptids definitely going to be a YouTube channel as far as I'm concerned. We have a lot of content for it, and I love to talk about that. And one of the things I hope to get out of this, as much as anybody covering all these different channels, is learning. Oaty cessation, simply about quitting smoking. I hope to be an encouragement to some people and share some things that could help. And so I'll be making a quit smoking video, YouTube video, and covering all kinds of different things. But this is absorbed. This is going to go into Oaty box of chocolates. Yep, the one-armed Twinkie used to smoke. Not anymore. One of the best decisions of my life was the choice to not be a slave to tobacco anymore. So Oaty quit smoking is going to be one long video put on a playlist, broken up into watchable links as well, so somebody can watch a 10-minute video and a 10-minute video and a 10-minute video, or they can watch the whole thing all at once. Whatever everybody's interested in. But if anybody's looking to quit smoking, I can tell you, it can be done. It is worth doing, but there's a lot of things that people do not tell you about quit smoking when they're out looking for quit smoking. So I'm going to tell you basically what they won't tell you about quit smoking, that I know about it, that I've done it. And I smoked, one time I smoked 4 cigarette packs in a 24-hour period. One day I was hauling for a company called